I grew a mustache recently. I mean, I didn't grow.
Is
I
it
had
a good
beard
mustache?
And I shaved. Actually, I
Or
think
is it
it
a
is.
trailer park mustache?
I think it's like a cop mustache, but a dirty cop.
Interesting.
Like a 70s dirty cop? Like a porn cop or like a cop?
I guess we're just at that point in quarantine because I shaved my facial hair to be a mustache and sideburns.
Oh, really?
And what I like to think is like an 1800s Wild West bartender look.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's a much more powerful look than I have.
That's very disco, Belvin. I like that.
I have disco hair, but I don't have the sideburns. I just have the cop stash. So really all I need is like some aviators and like a Hawaiian shirt with a white muscle shirt under it. And that'll be my look.
My facial hair is too close. It gets too itchy. So I just shave it off and get bored every time after like a week.
You gotta power through that shit. Because I noticed the same thing. But then like if you don't shave it for like 2 weeks, it stops itching completely.
Well, probably depends
the
person to
face
person.
facial hair does, but the neck doesn't.
Damn.
Well, the neck, you shouldn't have hair there anyway.
Yeah, if you have hair on your neck, stop listening to this show.
This week's episode brought to you by the Dollar Shave Club. You can go to their website and enter promo code.
This is 30 Minute Worlds, by the way, a podcast where we build fantasy settings in 30 minutes and offer unsolicited but helpful medical advice to those of you out here. Some may say we're not experts, but I like to think that those people are not successful and they hate our podcast because they'll never be us.
Yeah, we're not medical doctors, but we are passing the savings on to you, actually.
Exactly. There's no fee. I'm going to roll the dice here to determine who is the lore lad and who gets creative control of the setting. Chessman, unfortunately, is absent for this setting and will mourn his loss greatly.
He's temporarily dead.
He died temporarily.
For a brief moment.
Entering the spirit world temporarily.
He does this like at the end of summer, every third season, he just has to sort of, or every second season.
Yeah.
It happens. It's a problem.
And the roll is a 1, which would be Chessman. I'm re-rolling it. It's a 1 again. It's 3 1s.
The spirits have spoken.
It's a 2. It's Daniel. Daniel.
Okay, all right.
Chessman, edit out the part where you were lore lad 3 times. We can't let people know about the shamanistic power you had over the
This
dice.
professional gaff.
Oh, man. Dan, you are the lad, and that means you also, in the event of a 3-player game, get to pick your prompt first and have it not be influenced by other prompts.
Okay, yeah, the word is curse.
Ooh, curse. Curse. Interesting. Okay. Belvin.
Swashbuckle.
Swashbuckle.
Like singular. Okay.
Someone's been watching a certain show. I'm going to say... I had one and now I forgot what it was. I'm going to say... Sunlight.
Sunlight. Okay. So, Belvin, when you say swashbuckle, I assume you're not obliquely referencing something I don't understand, and you are talking about a sort of rapier-wielding ne'er-do-well fighter
style, yes, where you're sort of...
swashbuckling style.
It's a vibe, it's a look. I couldn't even define it, which is maybe a bad choice of word then, but you know what I mean. Swashbuckling.
No, it's a vibe. Yeah. It's a... Look, swashbuckle.
It's an Errol Flynn type.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've got swashing, we got curses, we got sun.
Uh-huh.
So the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that is basically the idea of a setting where there are like perhaps people are cursed or rather possessed in some way by the spirits of long dead famous fighters of yore who are perhaps plagued upon by the sun, or maybe
what if they have to outrun the sun because they're ghosts, so they can only do piracy and shit at night, so they're sailing around the world.
I feel like we're getting into Pirates of the Caribbean territory.
Well, you said
You
swashbuckle.
picked Swashbuckler.
Well, that should
After
mean
hearing curse,
the next thought
you
should be,
picked
okay, how do we make this
swashbuckle.
not Pirates of the Caribbean then?
Okay, how about
You
instead
can't-
of sailing, let's throw sailing away and let's
You're
do
throwing
like
sailing away with swashbuckle? Okay.
They're Musketeers.
well, we can do like an Italian like kind of city state where there are like, swordsmen that kind of roam about and fight one another for status and fame, and there's like arenas and street duels by night and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not doing Pirates of the Caribbean, which I also agree with Belvin, we should not do
I
Pirates of the
insist it
Caribbean.
should still be a port city.
Yeah,
That makes the
that's
most,
fine.
Very
That
well.
vibe, it
you know,
works.
Well, so when you
concede
combine-
this to me, at least.
When you combine curse and sun, that's interesting. Because the curse could be that there is no sun, or the curse could be there's a lot of sun.
Yeah, it could be too much sun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does that look like? Too much sun? Like, so the obvious like direction is like vampires, and that's not super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, vampire swordsmen fighting for control of an Italian city-state by night is actually kind of interesting, but not really a setting in the traditional way that we've done it, I guess.
Right. Mm. What if the curse doesn't have to do with the sun, but how you react to the sun?
Well, that's the vampire.
Doesn't that mean
rules.
it kind of has to
That's
do with the sun?
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe instead of like what Belvin said, instead of the curse being something that affects these swashbucklers, the curse is something that these swashbucklers are fighting against instead. And the curse does deal with like the manipulation of the sun, basically.
Ooh, yeah, I like the idea of all these swashbucklers being on a quest.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I keep hearing swashbuckling and defaulting to sailing. If there were only sun, and it were never nighttime, it would be impossible to navigate the sea because there are no stars.
So there's a scheme being hatched to basically shut down this sort of Venice XP, then their ability to navigate and trade by using the stars at night by making the sun
At least in the area
exist
of
permanently in the day.
the sea around this city. Yeah.
No, I think in this world there's been a curse done so that it's always sunny out. Like the sun does not move in position.
Mm-hmm.
And the quest to go on that these swashbucklers are, in caves doing Indiana Jones stuff to try to figure out on the high seas, where quests are best made, are trying to solve this.
Okay.
I like that, but we have written a children's adventure novel and not so much
So be
a
it.
setting.
Every time Belvin's on the show.
Well, it's not so much a children's. It's kind of got the serial vibe in my, just like the inspiration for Star Wars and Indiana Jones for old serials.
Uh-huh.
That I guess that's filtered through my cultural consciousness, and so I like the idea of these swashbucklers being on an adventure.
So we've done a bunch of like world ocean settings and like archipelago settings. Like what if this instead is in the middle of like a giant like inland sea that is like the center of this world,
Yeah, the
basically.
Mediterranean.
And what if
sort
there's
of.
just a lot of city states? Like
Hell yeah. I hear
Um,
swashbuckling and I think city-states.
And it's not just that navigation is impacted, but crops. I mean, you have to.
Yeah, and it would make trade in meat far more prized and valuable because it's the one food that can really be consistently cultivated with just grass.
So what I'm kind of envisioning then is that in the sort of dominant trade area of this city, or of this inner sea region, there is a nation that is just through power of trade, basically mercantilistic. They dominate through trade. Yeah, exactly. And like the Sea Lord or like the ruling princes of that house have assembled basically a group of famous swashbucklers from around, or not even famous, but just accomplished swashbucklers from this sea region to stop this curse that will bring endless daylight to the world.
About
so they-
that curse, so what if there's like a entity or like something out there that's calling to people to explore, and it's called the Dark, and it's promising to return things to the natural order, and it's unclear kind of what it means by that or what this thing is. But it could be that the allure of the allure of like a population willing to like get rid of its sun would be attractive to some sort of dark entity willing to manipulate them. If that were the case.
Yeah, if this has been going on, like say this has been going on for 20 years, right? Enough time for society to shift
I'm
around.
picturing like
then there would be
less than half a century. Like this is a new phenomenon.
Then perhaps there are like night cultists who are being whispered to by some dark presence that is taking advantage of the situation.
Right. Just a thought anyway. I think it'd add for a cool dynamic apart from high adventure. There could be a lot of intrigue surrounding this night cult and their movements within the cities at large and the moves that they're making.
Yeah, and there are lots of merchants who are kind of buying into that faction. That'd be interesting.
I mean, they would have like infiltrated basically cities all across this inner sea. And basically playing the rulers against one another and like, oh, well, the leader of that city is actually conspiring with his wizard and that's why this happened. And all around, basically, like just sowing mistrust so people can't work together.
So how did it happen? Do we know? And how are people trying to fix it?
Yep, that's the big question.
Because they're exploring. That must mean that they think there's something out there.
What if there are artifacts of the sun god, like and whatever came before this Mediterranean type society? There was a sun god, and there's things like arcs and goblets and tablets and all that stuff. And the supposition of these swashbucklers is that by assembling these things, they can get the sun to start moving again.
What if? Okay, hang on. I like the sun god idea, but what if his artifacts are less ancient, like tablets and stuff, and more like things a swashbuckler would have? Because that's like, he could also be kind of an adventurer. He could have like a flintlock. Like, we could assume this is an area of fantasy that's kind of been like this for a long time.
So he's like a polyglot deity, like of exploration and the sun and swashbuckling.
Well, he steers a golden ship through the sky.
Okay, well, that's interesting because I mean the idea that this setting has been like this setting for a lot longer than normal technology would.
Yeah, you can mythologize things like guns. Yeah. You can be like, oh, this is like God's mythical pistol that supposedly had like 1,000 barrels. We're going to go searching for it. Like crazy shit like that. That God would have. Yeah.
So the night cultists assembled these tools and used them to lock the sun permanently in the sky and have since scattered them to the winds to prevent anybody from using it against them.
Well, I don't know if the night cultists, because if they had the power to exert that much control over the sun, wouldn't they just make it night all the time anyway? I don't think they have anything to do with the original onset of the curse.
Yeah, well, we've gone to this well a few times, so we could shy away from this. But if there's a sun god, there's a night god, right? A moon god.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Moon god.
Holistic mythology.
He's cool.
Moon god, yeah. So the question is why... Because it's interesting. It's not like the moon god killed sun god, theoretically, because the sun is always there. Like, the moon doesn't come out. So
what if the moon is like a neutral entity and there is a night god? So there's a tripartite sort of faction system
the moon
within the gods.
Is an aspect of the sun, too.
She's often portrayed as kind of a wife to the sun, or like a sort of ally with the sun. And if the sun doesn't shine, neither does the moon,
Oh, you know what? What if the sun won? What if this is what the sun god wants?
Oh, that would kind of be funny.
We're actually shining.
Well, he's put an end to his adventure. He's retired. That's actually what it is.
He doesn't want to steer the ship across the sky every day anymore. Yeah.
And they don't know that that's what's happening because they don't have like a way to conceptualize it like that. But yeah. He's just pulled into port and he's going to enjoy his time at rest.
So then the hunt basically is on, like I would imagine that this society, which is basically a secret society of swashbucklers, did not set out knowing necessarily what they were going to do, but knew that there were ruins related to the worship of the sun god in antiquity that they could explore, and there are experts around the inner sea they can consult and things like that.
That's why his artifacts are everywhere, because he doesn't need them anymore. And so once this happened, people kind of explored the known world, and then they found something. They're like, this belongs to the sun god, and it should be on his person, but it's not.
Ooh,
so
I have
what
an
the
idea.
hell?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
what if in this setting you can become a mythic being? In the same way that, say, Hercules is in the stars now, like, but I mean, he's a demigod. But assuming that demigods don't exist and you're just a person who's really prominent in this setting, you kind of ascend to a point of mythicality. So that maybe there's a merchant who is so successful and so resplendent that he's just kept on living all this time. And he has his own place up in the mountains. And like, so these mythic beings are all around this world who are, if the sun god's a swashbuckler, it makes sense if he started as just like the most swashbuckling swashbuckler. And he just...
So basically a setting where through your labors you can become deified?
Yes.
Or something
Yeah,
like
that
that.
makes
I like the
sense.
idea of like the god of fishermen is just some random podunk peasant that hold up like a 20-foot just like sturgeon out of the sea.
It
And
was
like,
cool
damn,
too.
it's a big fish.
Because that explains why the sun god retired. He's like, I've been doing this for way longer than the guy before me. And he's like, I've been doing this for too long. It's time for someone else to do it. And he thinks someone will naturally, like, replace him.
Ooh, and at the end of the story, if we're thinking of this as maybe a story, one of the swashbucklers who's in this guild of searchers takes his place.
Well, yeah, that'd be, like, you have to get the sun god's hat and, like, his brace of pistols, and you get to pilot the ship in the sky and take the wheel and set sail.
Right, but it's your exploits too. Like you, along the way, you're being the most swashbuckler that ever swashbuckled.
Right, and so that's why his artifacts are scattered everywhere. Now, what about this night god? It would make sense if we envision the sun as kind of sailing a sea of sky. The night god would be the god constantly being thwarted by him and throwing dangers at him that humanity can't even see up there.
Because the night god's on the retreat most of the time, right? Because like the moon is a thing and the stars are a thing. So even in his time, he's still weakened.
What if the moon is like the sun god's first mate? Instead of a wife relationship, it's like a ship relationship where he's like a sidekick and he's like scouting ahead.
I could see that. And I kind of see the moon as representing like safe moorage, basically, in this world.
Oh, real quick, so I get this out there. What I was thinking with the all these mythic beings that are still running around in this world, I think the sun god will have left a lot of his artifacts with them. So the swashbucklers have to either get through them or like win their favor, whatever, to get access to them.
Well, he probably gave them to them because he thought these guys would be his best bet in becoming the next sun god, because a lot of them are like already halfway there, you know?
Well, and it's more interesting too because you're not just scouring ancient ruins all the time, although that happens, but like you also have to just impress like the god of jurisprudence or something, like by like passing a verdict in a trial or stuff like that. Like there's all sorts of minor podunk gods you have to go out and impress to earn the right to be a god.
And do you really think the god of intrigue is going to just give you the shit that you want? No, he's going to make you do all this.
He's going to make you do a heist movie.
And then he's going to keep it for himself because he was plotting to betray you the whole time. He would never give it to you.
A god of wine who will have just had the best vineyard in the land.
Yeah, he has his belt buckle or some shit. He's
bring me the finest vintage from across the sea. Or like, we're really hoping to wrap this up within like a week. That's like 3 months.
So yeah, they're traveling to all these islands and shit, and they have to combat. So if y'all want to talk about minor gods, it's cool too, actually. But we could talk about the night god more, I think, and kind of...
I think we've fleshed out the idea of the minor. Like, you can pretty much roll that any direction you want by thinking about it, like, of any subject area. That there would be a deity.
The demigods. Yeah, so... Yeah, night god, it's interesting. For some reason, my brain is heading towards, like, a merchant. Like that some...
Yeah, you mentioned merchant earlier, and I was like, oh, do you have... Because I think where you're pulling is he's thematically kind of the opposite of a swashbuckler. He loves stability. His affairs are disrupted by the swashbuckler constantly.
Yeah, but he likes nighttime because it's kind of a cloak, a shadow for all these dealings.
So it's not really in his interests to let... Like, he actually does want someone to replace the sun god, though, because right now there's no night. He'd like that to go back.
Well,
I mean...
He like it to go back, but he also realizes there's a power vacuum. And he realizes if the ship of the sun sits there long enough, it's going to fall into disrepair and it's not going to be usable. You know, it's going to rot away in port. So he's trying to stall people.
I don't know if this,
So he's playing,
this
like-
golden magic ship would rot, but in my conception of his motivations, he is greedy and he wants what the sun has right now, which is to always be in the same state. He wants permanent night now. He doesn't want balance or anything.
There's a vacuum, and he's like, I can seize power in this vacuum.
Yeah, while all these people are crying out for nighttime.
And so he's making his moves now. And I think it is cool to portray him as kind of like he represents both the terror of night, the terror of the sea, if we envision the sun as like a sailor, and also like the terror of like intrigue and plotting and shit like that you would find in a city-state.
The shadowy webs.
So his secret society, basically, or his
his fraternal order,
spies, are working to hamstring the efforts of these swashbucklers in the interest of. I mean, it's almost like they want them to get the artifacts and then take them from the swashbucklers.
Would be nice if they had all the artifacts on one person, then they could just gank that one person, wouldn't it? Which is why they would definitely be planning to do that, right?
I would think the way that it would look is they would be sort of in the background, like machinating things, like that they will come into contact with these artifacts, but also playing with the knowledge that if the opportunity arises, they'll either swipe it or they'll plan to swipe it down the line from them. Because they want them to do the heavy lifting, but they want to take the stuff.
Right. A lot of the times the person you're contracted to, there's such like a web of secrecy around all like written paper dealings. You know, you often don't know who you're contracted for. And that's like a standard in swashbuckling or whatever in this setting. And they're like using that to their advantage.
Yeah, I like that. Trying to think what so we've got now like the world itself. We've got the people the story is following. We've got the conflict. We've got the protagonists and the antagonists, and we've got a sort of religious cosmology.
Yeah, that's pretty fast for us for like 24 minutes.
Worlds.
Yeah,
new show.
That's crazy. We should drill down on specific areas, I think, of the world to explore or start out in theoretically.
Okay, so there's this boot-shaped landmass called Biddley.
Cut.
Used to be part of an empire called Bohm.
You know we can't use the Italian trademark anymore. The Italian trademark. We've lost that suit like 4 times. You did
The
Italy,
trademark on
you did
Italy.
Sicily, you did Piddly. It didn't work.
Yeah. We lost to Little Caesars pizza. We can't use any Italian imagery.
Well, I guess a good question would be, is there any twist we want to put on the Mediterranean setting? Like, are we just saying, okay,
So-
sketch it in, think kind of like Mediterranean vibe?
What if it's more like Three Musketeers-y? I mean, it doesn't have to be Italy. It could be more like medieval France. But I think
Like an early modern kind of.
when you say swashbuckling, that does evoke kind of an image, and you want to keep that Renaissance or like early period imagery. You know?
I mean, to an extent, we have to rely on XPs a little bit here of like France and Italy, but we could also do something like, what if this inner sea recently, one of the older cities got conquered by people that traveled across like a vast desert or something, that are more like, they're like Hittites or something like that. They came like on chariots, and they don't really have any knowledge of the sea, but they've conquered this place, and they have different weapons than the people that live here.
They're just being introduced to like gunpowder and stuff because that's what's endemic, like in this region, as far as weapons
and
go.
what if one of them becomes God of War without really knowing about this whole
that'd be
demigod
cool.
process? Because this
That'd
is
be cool.
somehow
Yeah.
specific to this area.
So there's an old ancient city that has been conquered by these people from like the far south or whatever, who in his process of conquest, their leader has become the god of war.
Right, and now it's like a Timur the Lame situation where they're adapting new weaponry that like we think they shouldn't be able to use and using it against the swashbuckler kingdoms.
Well,
That'd be really cool.
This guy could have the sword of the sun god.
Oh shit, that would be cool too.
Like maybe the sun god challenged him to a duel just for fun, and then he lost. It's like, oh shit.
Well, I think the sun god wouldn't like. Yeah, he'd challenge him to a duel, but I think it's funny if his motivation is a human one. since we've established that gods were once human.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
think of them as demigods, essentially.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he would want to put his boots up after a while, you know?
Well, I like the idea that like this demigod he's basically like a third player in all this, right? Like he'd like to increase his people's influence in the region, and the conflict about the sun and night is more or less not super interesting to him. Because they just came across the desert, it's already hot. Who cares? They know how to live like this.
What if there's like this tiny island naval state that's not very navally powerful, but it's the island shaped like the moon? And that's always been of significance to their people because the moon is the sun's.
What phase of moon? Like a circle,
like
or
a crescent,
like
a very
crescent?
identifiable crescent moon, like a moon, like a moon shaped, you know,
A waxing gibbous.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
no. All right, crescent.
Because of this, they have a tradition of they're like mercenaries, but they're only for scouting, but they'll do it for anyone because they think it's their duty, like religiously, because they're devotees of this god. And so they have these like white-bowed, white-sailed scout ships that's like, it's like a war crime to fire upon them because they're servants of God, technically.
Ooh, what if they were the ones who set lighthouses all across the sea, but lighthouses are currently defunct, like there's no reason for them.
Yeah.
So these people have a bit of an identity crisis on their hands.
They still do the scouting, but yeah, a lot of their other duties, like in assisting ships, are now defunct. That'd be cool, actually. And I really like the idea of like there's a class of troop or like a class of ship on the sea that's a scout ship that you theoretically can't fire upon, even if it's scouting you, because it's dishonorable to the gods or whatever.
Yes, sea law.
It's running an enemy flag, but it's still a ship of like, you know.
What if there's like an economic incentive too? Like, what if these people are the best like cartographers basically in the known world? Like,
Yeah, it would make sense if the moon kind of had a cartography role. If the night is a sea, he's mapping out the course for the sun. That's kind of neat. Okay, I like this place.
I'm trying to think if there's like one more like
And it'll be called
just sort of thing we could flesh out.
Genoa. Wait, no. It'll be called
Cyprus.
It'll be called no.
Olivia.
Corsica.
It'll be called Palisadia. That'll be what it's called. Palisadia. And then Belvin, what was your Southland called with the warlord?
That was Daniel's pool.
Daniel's pool.
I hate thinking of names on the fly.
Jarta.
Be like
Jarda?
Jarta.
Jarda.
It'd be cool
sure.
if every name ended with an A, kind of to cultivate that swashbuckly vibe.
Well, these would be like pretty explicit foreigners, I would think, but either way.
Yeah, I'm also imagining like a bit of a Greek flavor just because we're dealing with like demigods.
Yeah,
here.
you definitely, yeah. That's something we should consider,
So
too.
I guess when I'm thinking of the architecture, I'm thinking of like a little Athenian flair. Some colonnades.
Certainly the ancient sun temples. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was probably a sun god before the sun
totally.
buckler. But
A more 9 to 5 sort of guy.
It might be funny if there was like a period thousands of years ago, multiple sun gods ago, where one sun god did this exact same thing, and we barely have a recollection of it. But he like went on strike. He was like, "This is bullshit."
all the sun gods are just assholes.
It's hot.
checks out.
It's hot on the ship. I mean,
It's an unpleasant job.
kind of like
Nobody
a
wants
duty.
it.
Sweating.
Yeah. It's something that appeals to them because all the sun gods come from a place of ego, and they're like, "Yes, I'm the star."
Yeah, but like when you think about it, yeah, you don't get to sleep. It's constant adventure. It's constant sailing, and you're on the edge of your seat all the time. It'd be exhausting.
Yeah, I like to think that if we're thinking of this in like semi-story terms, in terms of like there's a conflict that will be resolved when the sun starts setting again. I like to think one of the last things that happen is this troop of adventurers, of swashbucklers, are sent up into the sunland onto the ship.
Well, what if when you... Oh, go on. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I don't know the mechanisms.
What
just
if you're a great sailor and you die, you join the sun's crew?
Oh.
Pirates of the Caribbean. No, I like that.
Yeah, because it's a huge ship. I mean, it's the size of the sun, so obviously you need a lot of hands on deck for that to work.
Maybe it could be something like, because for obvious reasons, like it's not like you just said a particularly pleasant job, but maybe if you crew on the sun ship for like a certain number of years, you get reincarnated faster.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That'd be cool. And also, if we're talking about like adventure, if the sun ship is not just going around endless night and endless day and just doing something that's kind of rote, like what if once you get to that point, you're like having to fight off astral beings and stuff? It just like gets kind of crazy and cosmic.
like a cosmic struggle.
The night is like throwing cosmic horrors at the sun that we can't see because the sun, with like cannonades and shit, is like fighting it off.
And there are all sorts of heavenly pleasures on the sun ship.
Okay,
pleasure. Okay, so I like that, and I am into it, but we really don't have time to flesh it out.
When I say pleasures, you don't have to be perverts.
No, I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the whole concept of like it out in space fighting giant spooky space monsters and stuff like that.
Cool,
I like that. It's cool.
Yeah.
But we don't have time to go into that.
Let's discuss a few more places here in this Earth that we have.
We could. We're also hitting the 30-minute mark that we could be clean about.
Yeah, we go a bit longer. I think this is a good setting, and we could.
It is a fun one because I like settings that just have all this possibility, right? Because once you say like just this web of city states, then all of these city states can just be interesting in their own right.
Yeah, it's really once you say swashbuckling, you'd have to be an idiot to not make a good setting out of that. You'd have to be really dumb to not make.
We could do something like
yeah, it was really good.
It's not like a culturally flavored city, but there's one place where like an ideology of one god has arisen. And it's probably like whoever the god of preaching is, because he was just such a good prophet, is now like everybody. He can convince everybody that he's the one true god.
His name is Promptus,
and he's using the sun as the center point of his preaching. Actually, getting a little more influence now because maybe he'll like lie and convince people that he prophesied this to happen, or be explaining the significance as like this is the sun showing deference to him or doing his will or something.
Yeah, because he's trying to become the sun god by getting voted in, like the lame way through democracy.
His followers show up like in your tavern, and you're like, "Oh, it's those guys. Don't make eye contact with those guys." They hand you these literature pamphlets.
At least they're not Moonies.
We could think through briefly the implications of the sun not setting for 20 years.
Yeah, I mean,
crime
the crops would
be different. Like, you couldn't have as many thieves and rogues in the night.
Well, I think there would be thievery, but it would be a much more daring enterprise and much more showboaty.
Right, it'd be a little more violent maybe because they have to get you at knife point.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. But, in exchange for whimsicality, you do have to, get some violence in there.
You think of, like, more of a swashbuckling kind of robbery?
Yeah, well, it would, because there's no nighttime crime, so it all has to be daring daylight robberies.
Someone just has a rapier point at your throat, like, I'll be taking that.
I'll be kidnapping the princess. Yeah, princess kidnappings in broad daylight surge.
The wealthy can block out the sun to sleep. Other people have more trouble.
Cool. You build like a giant.
Well, I mean, I'm just talking about like blackout curtains and shit. Nothing that is too crazy.
You could have palatial like complexes basically that are designed to be totally blacked out from the sun.
Oh yeah, they just build their own night. Like the richest merchants would build these areas that is like functionally like nighttime. They have like little lights to simulate the stars and the moon.
Because the sun doesn't move. Shadows don't change, which means that areas of real estate that have shade are super valuable.
Yeah.
Because shade is now permanent.
Shade is permanent. Yeah, that's fascinating.
The grass under shaded areas just dies over time.
Oh, damn.
There's like people living in hovels that were like previously worthless, but now they're in the shade, so the real estate value has gone up like 100 times.
It's created new merchant families overnight, just selling shaded areas of town.
Yeah, and they're... I think that thing we mentioned with like this giant dome to simulate nighttime, maybe one of the city-states is the richest one by far. It has like the most merchants there, and some merchants there have built that.
It'd be cool if there was actually an entire city under the shade of a mountain and it's become like a fabulously wealthy vacation destination.
It's a resort town.
Yeah. It's
Like
kind
you
of in
go and instead of going to like a hot spring, you sit in like an ice bath. Like
yeah, I think that'd be really fun. This is a great setting. I'm glad we built this one together, guys.
Yes.
This was
Yeah, I
really
enjoyed it
nice.
too.
Well, folks, that's the show. Lorelad, any parting thoughts? Any things you want to add?
If we were ever to revisit this, I'm interested in the idea of the sort of cosmic struggle. But this is also one of the settings we've done that I feel like could pretty easily be made into like an adventure path of some kind in your RPG of choice. But
If you
I
look
liked
for
it. This is a
wizards-
bit more narrowed in scope, but I
Yeah.
like the way that we tied in gods to it. Like the ascension to godhood is interesting.
If y'all like this episode, you can subscribe to us on your podcasting service of choice to get new episodes every Wednesday. If you're feeling saucy, go ahead and write us a 5-star review and share us with your world-building friends. It really helps us out. Our art is courtesy of the talented and wonderful Shell Tor, a lovely woman, at Jovial Paradox on Twitter, and you can tweet at us too at LoreLads, or send us spirited hate mail at 30minuteworlds@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy world building.